Pentimento by Kyme. Narrated by dyslexic little me. The body stood erect and cruciform, naked and without modesty. Male, though the anatomical excisions made this difficult to define for certain, as did the general disfigurement to the victim overall. It appeared almost ritualistic, a statement of some kind. Observation was Mabeth's art. She had an eye for it, or so Hakasto had joked. Gifted, some said. To her, the old artisan had been like a father. He taught her everything he knew, until eventually she surpassed him. Oko Hakasto's craft became Mabeth's craft. She, his only student. Then their work had been venerated around the world, as nobles and oligarchs clamored for a sitting with the great Hakasto and his protégé. Coin, renown, they had been short of neither. And now, they say scent is the most powerful sense memory. Sitting in that empty church, the air thick with the reek of copper, Mabeth remembered her master. His legacy had ended with a knife in his neck and his arterial blood making a terrible mess of his otherwise fine robes. Coin, renown, but also jealousy and greed. She had wept and not changed her mourning robes for 6 days, her eyes thick with kohl, her lips inked black. His death, for all its callous senselessness, was mundane. Not like this. This was art. Grotesque, unconscionable, but art nonetheless. And she knew art. Hakasto had not taught her that. That was innate. She bled art. And there was much blood, lustrous and red. Now, only the dead will sit for her, and they had little choice or awareness of the matter. As Mabeth sketched, she took in the arms that had been strung by the victim's own sinews, hanging limply, as if some godlike and invisible puppeteer held onto them from above. No, not a puppet, she realized. She had misread the artist's intentions. She sketched splayed feet, their broken toes and bones disentended, and the clawed fingers reaching like strange branches. And finally, the position of the body, utterly straight, rigid as any trunk. A tree, she murmured aloud, pausing to regard it. What? Asked Levio. The proctor sounded gruff, his unshaven face further testimony of either a lack of self-respect or the lateness of the hour, or both. He was badly dressed in the long coat and peacekeeper fatigues, one of several weary lawmen at large in the church. He wore it at the Aquila rosary wrapped around his wrist, half eyeing the shadows of the dingy church, with only stab lights to lift the darkness. He hid his irritation poorly. A tree, Mabeth repeated, her charcoal stylus poised. He has been arranged in the manner and aspect of a tree. There aren't any trees in the city. I didn't say it was based on anything in Durgov. Levio took another look. I only see some poor bastard tortured to death. He turned, frowned. You said arranged. Mabeth nodded. What do you think it means? Growth, rebirth, knowledge maybe, she said. A tree has broad symbolic meaning. I don't see meaning, I see madness. City's infected with it. It had got worse. Ever since the sky had changed and the astropaths had died. No word out, no word in. The entire world had been affected. Something had happened, but no one knew what it was, only that it had. Powerlessness bred fear. Fear bred violence. And so it went. Why am I here, Proctor Levio? Arbitrator wants a record. He started to pick at something in his teeth. Doesn't want to come down here to see for herself. Mabeth gestured to the perturbed-looking hunchback busying around a picture unit. Then what's he here for? Will the pictograph not capture a more accurate impression of the scene? Not to mention be much faster? I'm not complaining, she hastened to add. I need the coin. Not much work for an artist when every patron has decided to start hoarding their wealth for the end of days. I honestly do not know, admitted Levius. So far he's done precisely fifth all. The hunchback's dark robes did hid several disfigurements, most of them cybernetic in nature. He was a sacristan, conversant in the utilization and repair of machines. Right now, as he switched out parts from the picture or replaced power cells, he appeared only to be conversant in a varied lexicon of expletives. Here, Levio pulled a folder from his long coat and handed it to Mabeth. She opened it and leafed through several flimsies. They are all useless, she said, frowning. Just blurred images. Yep. Doesn't matter what that hunchback arsehole does, the pics won't come out. That's the sixth picture we've tried. How long have you been in here? Rebio rubbed his unshaven face, and she had her answer. Mabeth looked back through the images. They were obfuscated as if overexposed or smeared by a sudden jerk of the lens. But the subject was static, the picture secure and the light steady. This is very strange, she considered. I've gone from strange to irritating, and I'm circling livid or suicidal, said Livio. It changes by the minute. Mabeth glanced down at her sketch. The rendering was good. The carve of the thigh, the overall musculature, the texture of the lank hair and scarred flesh, as vivid as she had ever been on parchment, and almost more real than any pictograph. I see, she said, handing back the useless flimsies. So, if you don't mind, said Levio, hurry it the hell up. I can't get out of here until you're finished. He walked away to berate the sacristan, leaving Mabeth to it. Charming, she whispered, but her work was almost done. Just a little detailing remained. She had a leather field case for carrying all her equipment and pulled from it a magnifying lens she attached over her left eye via a skull frame. Up close, even by the lens, the scene felt intimate. Every knife stroke revealed every abuse, and it was neat murder, almost surgical. It spoke to obsession. Through her enhancing lens, she looked through a picked window into something dark. She lingered on the face, partly hidden by the hair. Something looked back at her from those cold, dead eyes. Recognition? Mabeth found herself drawn, though she wanted to recoil. The lips were barely parted, but she caught the suggestion of white teeth, and then they moved. Paradise. Like a lover's breath against her ear, warm and susurrant. The scent of cloying lavender filled her nose. Mabeth tore away the lens, letting out a stifled cry. Ah! Livio whirled around, reaching for his sidearm, until he realized the girl had shrieked at shadows. It's nothing, she said, a little breathless, and out of instinct touched her neck. But there was nothing there. It just felt cold, like a strange absence. Levio scowled, standing down as he went to light up a smoke and muttering something about the bad decisions that had led up to this moment. Tentatively, Mabeth put the lens back on. Nothing happened. The body remained as it was, horrific but lifeless. There was no voice, no scent of lavender. Just old blood and musty prayer scrolls. She got what she needed and finished up, handing the parchment to the proctor on her way out. I expect prompt payment, she said by way of a parting shot. Levio's coarse laughter followed Mabeth until she had left the church. Gethic was waiting her outside. The servitor's dull eyes barely comprehending his surroundings. and not so different from the corpse Mabeth had just sketched. "Follow," she uttered as she passed the brutish creature, hearing him fall into clumping lockstep behind her. The city had lost its mind since the killing, so it paid to have protection, even if Gethig was a piece of cyborganic fecal matter better suited to the scraphead than bodyguard detail. Intimidation went a long way through, and Gethig was big. He smelled of machine oil and rust, but at least it helped to banish the memory of sickly lavender. "Must be tired," she said, and through the gaps in the overarching buildings caught glimpses of the sky. A blood-red blush colored it, like pain clouding in water. Shouts echoed on the warm night air, a sign of the madness to come. She'd been gone before any of that. Maebeth turned away and headed for the magrail. The other patrons in the carriage gave Gethik a wide berth. Though the servitor barely noticed them, and the late hour had thinned the ground substantially, so it was not hard to find a seat. Fires lit parts of the city, seen through a grimy window. The violence had started early tonight. It would not trouble her here, Maybeth reflected, as the rattling journey played out in all its mundanity. Sat in her protector's shadow, she tried to remember everything she had experienced in the church. She must have imagined it, but it did not feel imagined. She had felt his breath, smelled lavender. The voice had sounded old, but melodic, definitely male. Not an accent she knew, though, and not from Durgov, from elsewhere. Her mind had conjured it from some remembrance, she reasoned. She rubbed her neck, her fingers gently caressing. The downy hairs felt soft to the touch, and her eyelids fluttered. Paradise. Maybeth sat bolt upright, suddenly aware of her surroundings. Perspiration doubled her skin, her fingertips tingling. A face looked back at her, reflected in the glass. Young and pale from a lifetime spent in her studio, shaven hair with a streak of violet running through it, a writing serpentine neck tattoo her own design, jewelry on her wrists, gold and platinum, good robes of warm cerise, and at the vermilion clock with a silver artisanal clasp. Last season's fashion she couldn't keep up like she used to, but her clothes and traps were still finer than most. Affluent, it spoke to her success. She admired her reflection, pleased with what she saw. And just behind it another face, smiling and overlarge, human, and yet Maybeth turned around, heart pounding, but there was no one sitting behind her. A couple of Factorum workers from farther back in the carriage glanced up at the sudden movement, but quickly became downcast again as the day's labors grew heavy. When she looked back, the face had gone. So startled was she, Maybeth nearly missed her stop and had to dash for the exit, her lumbering retainer in tow. "I need to find a different line of work, Gethik," she said, rubbing her eyes as she walked, her hub tower close by. The servitor did not reply and merely shadowed her as always. "What's that?" asked Maybeth, miming as if he had spoken. "I'm in the wrong profession." She gave a rueful shake of the head as Ulrich House came into view, not so gilded any more with its tatty facade and chipped colonnade. "Yes, you're right. I do need a change in fortune." Greeting the door warden with a tired wave, she went inside. He smiled as she passed, his mouth altogether too wide under the vision slit of his helmet, the teeth too white and too many. Maybeth recoiled, but the card sour look had reappeared almost immediately. "I'm losing my damn mind," she heard inside. Her well-appointed rooms greeted Maybeth upon her return. Everything was as she had left it, the chase, the hookah pie, her silks and fine drapery, the ornaments and artist's lectern. Dark on account of the hour, she instructed Gethik to light the lamps. The gloom lifted, shadows lengthened in corners and filled alcoves. The glass shades colored the light, turning it into competing jades and crimsons. Maybeth collapsed into a pile of plush cushions, her hand outstretched for the drink that Gethik then provided. A sip of absinthe helped ease her nerves, warming as it passed down her throat. "Leave me," she uttered, reaching for the hookah, as Gethik turned without comment and retreated into his alcove out of her sight. Maybeth supped on the pipe, taking long draughts of Kalma smoke. It had been hard to acquire, and not a little expensive too, worth every coin through. She imbibed it and smoked until the bottle had drained and her eyelids grew heavy. Fingers slipping from the neck of the pipe, she drifted into a fitful sleep. As she breathed, the smell of oversweet lavender lingered before something sharper replaced it. She dreamed of a forest, not of trees, but of the dead, their limbs contorted in branches, their feet rooted to the earth, and the red sap of their blood. Maybeth walked drenched in sweat, the lingering scent of warm copper already fading. Grey lights surrounded her. The hour still early. Gethik must have doused the lamps. She started as she saw him looming over her, his dual bionic eye glowing like dirty amber. "What are you doing?" she croaked, annoyed at her own skittishness. "What are you doing, slave?" Gethik did not respond. Her throat felt hoarse, like she'd been screaming in her sleep. The servitor's protection protocols must have kicked in. I'm fine. She lied, deciding to get up. That's when she noticed the metal tube in Gethik's hands. He had not activated because of a protection protocol. He had taken receipt of a package. It came with an attached note. A snap of her fingers and Gethik lit the nearest lamp. "Mab," the note began, "I think I may have found the last distant paying commission in this entire fecal heap of a city." She knew the handwriting. Irina was Mabeth's abettor, a seeker of work. It was she who had secured the contract with the peacekeepers. Hardly what Mabeth was used to, but it kept the debtors at bay and her decanters full. There was a time when they had enjoyed more than just a business relationship. But Maybeth's tastes had changed, and so had her suitors. Still, old memories stirred at seeing her delicate script and provoked a frisson of lust. She turned over the parchment into the opposite side. "Private contract. 3 pieces. Simple restoration needed. Yes, I know it's still low end, but it pays better than the peacekeepers, and there are fewer dead bodies." She signed off Y, adding a postscript. "And that ugly golem needs a thorough cleansing, by the way, my dear." The note came with the address of the commissioner and the fee amount her abettor had brokered. Maybeth smiled and took the metal tube. "Well done, Irina." The tube had been marked with an unfamiliar merchant sigil that looked like a V. Inside, she found 3 pieces of rolled-up canvas. Unfurling each in turn, Maybeth laid them out on the floor, weighing them down with ornaments to keep them from curling back up. They were venerations, holy scenes from imperial history, albeit faded and in need of repair. She didn't recognize the saints depicted or the other religious figures, the cardinals and the abbesses. She only saw the work ahead and began immediately. Maybeth fashioned simple frames for each piece from which she could begin the restoration, and then placed them upon her artist's lectern, which was wide enough to accommodate all 3. Curious, she thought, regarding them as a set, and wondering what interest a mercantile house would have in ecclesiarchical relics. A thorough assessment of the condition of the pieces preceded any actual work. The canvas was old, that much was quick to determine, although precisely how old she genuinely could not say. It had been preserved with oils or perhaps some synthetic equivalent, which made the canvas slightly stiff and flaky at the edges. After she handled each piece to clean them, she noted a farinaceous substance layering her gloves. Again, she could not identify it, and it only happened on that first occasion, so she assumed the paintings hadn't been disturbed for some time. She worked steadily, reinvigorating the tired pastels, giving them vibrancy and bringing back their light. The brighter the image became, the more Maybeth felt reinvigorated. not unlike the ecclesiarchs in the paintings. The lighter her mood became, as if faith and protection radiated from it. Hour passed without her realizing, and by the time the phonograph started to drone, she had restored the cardinal's vestments and trappings. He was depicted standing upon some nondescript promontory, giving a fiery sermon to his flock. The phonogram droned again. She tried to ignore it, but it began to irritate. And when she turned and saw the peacekeepers in dance, she swore loudly. By the throne? Levio's gravel voice cracked through the receiver cup when she picked it up. Need your talents again. I have other work, Proctor. That can wait. Your contract gives us the city unrestricted access. Fething Irena, she thought, feeling less amorous towards the woman as Levio reminded her of that particular clause. Can it possibly wait? I'm in the middle of something. So am I. It's another one. And with those three words, Mabeth knew she would be leaving the hub as soon as the call was over. Same as last time? Different. Levio sounded like he was about to say more, but then swallowed audibly to clear his throat and gave her the address. Different? How? I'm not describing it over the phonogram. He snapped, then quickly regained his composure. Just get down here. He cut the feed and the phonogram line went dead. Difficult person. Mabeth looked back at the paintings. That will have to wait. That's dead, it seemed, will not. Another dilapidated church, another depravity. The sacristans had returned, more out of hope than expectation, and had just finished rigging a string of lumens to floor the scene with pearl-scented light as Mabeth made her entrance. She had to crane her neck to see. The victim had been suspended on wire. No, not wire. The veins had been pulled from its arms, woven together, and used to hang it like a piece of art. He's embracing it now, she thought, trying to remain analytical. The victim hung in front of an immense window, its glass side smeared in blood and other matter. One light streamed through, casting a ragged shadow. Entirely naked, the victim's arms were outstretched, its legs pinned together. But this was not what marked it out as different to the previous murder. The skin had been flayed from its back and chest, and then spread out like a pair of leathery wings behind it. Angelic, horrific. The ribs were exposed, rimmed with blood and glistening in the light. Intertwined organs had been heaped below, a rubbery tract unfurling from the abdomen like some gory streamer. The face was untouched but for one detail. One of the eyes had been cut out. Thrones, uttered Mabeth, and swiftly covered her mouth. She smelled Livio as he sidled up next to her, the reek of sweet and cheap tobacco pervasive. I understand why you didn't want to describe it over phonogram, she said, recovering. An aquila, he replied, gesturing to the victim's altered form. Even I can discern that much. Who the devil else does that? I don't know. A religious fanatic? Aren't you supposed to work that out? Rebio rubbed his balding scalp. The man looked paler and older since last night. I have no frame of reference for this. It will take strength, ventured Mabeth, and precision. Still think it's art. I think the killer does. Levio lit up a smoke. Paradise. Mabeth turned on him. What did you just say? From Levio's expression, she must have looked fearsome. He held up his hands. That's what the witnesses said. What bloody witness? She was literally, practically shaking. The smile, the sickly scent of lavender. Easy, said Levio. Calm down. Mabeth stirred, heart pounding. She felt feverish. A cold sweat clung to her body like a rotten bandage. Are you all right? She snapped back hard as a spring. The fever ebbed. I'm fine, she lied. I I didn't know there had been a witness.
Why does it matter?
Someone is killing people seemingly at random and turning them into grotesque anatomical works of art, Maybeth replied, still a little shaky. I'm both professionally intrigued and personally appalled. Of course it matters. Who's the witness?
An old curate. The church is mostly in a state of disrepair. He was effectively the caretaker until it could be restored, though not much chance of that given the state of things. He's back at the precinct house with the interrogators, who are trying to find out what he knows.
He didn't tell them?
Beyond saying that word, he hasn't said much of anything. Whatever he saw, he didn't like it. It definitely wasn't him who did it before you ask.
I wasn't going to.
Yeah, strength and precision and all that. Fancy yourself a peacekeeper, artisan?
Maybeth didn't answer. She had enough of Olivia. She gathered her tools and began. The sooner she got started, the sooner she could leave. The return to Oric House was conducted in silence. The rioting and unrest in the city had forced her to take a more circuitous route via Maglev, and by the time she reached her studio again, night had drawn in. It seemed perpetual now, and the memory of the flayed angel, as she had come to regard it, lingered like the aroma of decay. And no matter how hard she tried to mentally excruciate, it would not go away. A long pulse shower, when she was safely back in her domicile, did little but leave her itchy and hot. She dressed in a gown, a glass of absinthe to soothe her fractious nerves. Every mirror shawled by a blanket. On the journey back, she had assiduously avoided looking into any reflected surfaces, glass or otherwise. Silver snuff-box held at her nose to keep any undesirable odors at bay. No visitations from the lavender man came to her. Am I losing my mind? She murmured. Gethic, lurking in his alcove, offered no comment. Definitely losing it. If I'm trying to make conversation with a servitor. Perhaps she should call Irena for a rendezvous, but she didn't want to go out into the city at night, not with the curfew and the violence, and her domicile was in a parlous state, so she could not invite her over. Empty bottles everywhere, the reek of Kyme on her rugs and drapes. She settled for another absinthe instead, before slumping into a pile of cushions to regard the 3 paintings sitting on her lectern. Subject matter in kind, but different artists, she reflected. The work remained a refuge and a spiritual tonic. Maybeth sighed. It's not like I can sleep anyway. Putting her glass down, Maybeth took up her tools. It was late and the work painstaking, but she threw herself into it, as if each small act of restoration cleansed a part of her soul. The images in her mind lessened in intensity. The imagined scent of lavender faded. Saints were brought to life on canvas, and it felt good. She made swift progress, an obsessive-compulsive urge to be rid of the taint of something driving her. Then she saw something unexpected. She had begun to strip back the layers of ink and pigment, intending to rebuild them from the base up where the image was particularly degraded, when she noticed part of a second image, incongruent with the first revealed beneath. A magnifying lens from her iris attachment brought it into sharper focus. She could not tell what it was exactly, but was certain it was not part of the religious scene, a layer beneath a layer. Hakasto had called it Pentimento, when one image is subtly altered or a previous one painted over entirely. Though there was too little of the hidden image to discern much of anything about its subject, the rationale for hiding it was intriguing. Curious, Maybeth muttered, and tried to reveal more. She reasoned she could repair the upper image later, but this one beneath the secret beguiled her. Her fingers ached, and while a heavy dose of stims kept her going until the deep night hours, the scalpel eventually slipped her grasp, and she fell into an exhausted sleep. Maybeth woke to a feeling of disquiet and the vague memory of a troubling dream that, try as she might to grasp, dissipated like smoke. Sensations remained of pain and pleasure, the instinct of peeling back the layers of her skin to reveal the dark places within. She shivered despite the warmth of the morning and a blanket she had warped around herself. Through the half-light streaming through the drapes, she saw the paintings and felt a moment of profound arrhythmia. More of the secondary image had been revealed. It was the same on all three canvases, despite the fact she could not remember working on the other two. But then she had taken a cocktail of alcohol and narcotics. She had lost time before. Yet thick, she slurred, still drowsy. The servitor rumbled from its alcove. Show me vid from last night. The servitor had linked to a cogitator sitting on a low table, and Mabeth waited for the device to warm up. A flicking projector cast the images from the servitor's gaping mouth into the wall. Here we go, she whispered as the vid capture began to render and cycle. Then she frowned and glared over her shoulder at Gethic. I said last night. Confirmed, he said in a mechanical rasp, the voice coming from a Vox unit in the servitor's neck. This is everything? Confirmed. Her eyes narrowed, disbelieving. Are you certain, Gethic? Confirmed. Perhaps she needed a sacristan herself. The vid units in her domicile, the ones she used to capture her artistic process for later review, had to be faulty. Blurred images filled her world like an overexposed pict, only in motion. She caught snatches of something? Mabeth drew closer as the vid continued to run, trying to see past the image flicker. What in the hells? Not her domicile. Definitely not that. It looked like bones. A hard rap at the door gave her a start. She cursed loudly, rubbing her eyes from staring so intently at the image now posed on her wall. She called out, already regretting it. Identify. It was Livio. Couldn't reach you via phonogram. He grumbled through the door. He sounded even more perturbed than usual. So you came to my abode? Mabeth snapped. She dimly remembered asking Dethick to cut the phonogram shortly after she had entered. A glance at the unit confirmed it. Abode? Livio muttered something unseemly about artists and their relics, then added, So can I come in, or do we shout at each other through your door? Mabeth was sorely tempted, but she gestured for Gethick to let the proctor in. He cut the image first, the wall turning blank again. Even the sight of the proctor, disheveled, plaving and thin, brought back the fear. He had become synonymous with it. Is it him? She asked in a voice. The Lavender Man? Levio nodded, didn't challenge her. He had smelled it too. Faith! That meant it wasn't in her mind. It was something else. She chose not to comment and instead looked through a gap in her drapes at the dawning sky outside, at the strange heavens that now fell over the city, and she wondered. Take me there, she said, sparing a glance at the paintings, and went to get dressed. It was different this time, in every way. Not a church or a temple, no glassaic or catechisms, a woodland with an overgrown esplanade running through it. In a clearing, a body had been staked out, its limbs meticulously and perfectly bifurcated, four becoming eight, and arranged in a star shape. Pale white flesh, painstakingly exsanguinated, shimmered like wet marble in the rain. No sacristans this time. They had learned their lesson, that their technology had no part in this, no purchase upon whatever this was. It was just Livio and a squad of peacekeepers wearing black carapaces and carrying shotguns to ward off the curious. Mabeth counted herself among them, but she had been invited beyond the electoral cordon, her servitor waiting duly some distance behind her. Why? She asked simply. Why what? Levio answered. I'm not a damned mind-shriver. How should I know why the sick bastard is doing this? No, said Mabeth patiently. Why do you need me to illustrate this? It has to be captured, known, he said, then added more quietly.
Allegedly, certain parties are interested.
He extended his middle finger, so it looked like the letter I. Interrogators?
And worse, I expect.
He lit a smoke. Maybeth noticed his fingers trembled.
Look,
He blew out a plum.
if you don't want to do it, I can say I couldn't find you.
Won't your colleague say I was here? Maybeth jetted through the peacekeepers on sentry duty in the distance, partly veiled by the rain. She pulled up her collar, but it wasn't much comfort.
They want rid of this as much as I do. City's going to the hells in case you did not notice.
She had noticed. Say they don't give two shits about you.
Reassuring.
You know what I mean. Maybeth stared at the body. So cold, so beautiful. It was immaculate in every way, the work of a true artist. I want to do it, she said, mumbling the words. The weather soured further as Maybeth worked a protective sheath over the vellum to keep the ink and charcoal dry. Levio sheltered her with a parasol Maybeth had brought to the scene, his face a picture of resigned annoyance.
Is it a statement? Is that it?
He asked after a while.
Is that what is doing you, do you think?
Maybeth kept illustrating, her strokes deft and assured despite the horrific nature of her composition. I thought you said I should stick to what I know. Stop trying to be a peacekeeper.
I didn't say that.
Not in so many words. Levio grumbled his assent. I don't think it is as random as it appears, said Maybeth. A tree, an angel, now this. She paused to flex her fingers, tight after prolonged use of the charcoal stylus. It's almost as if he's recreating something, a ritual perhaps. The parasol shivered as Levio tried to stifle a sudden intake of breath. He bit his lip and kept pulling at the buttons of his storm cloak. He needed a smoke.
Ever since the sky changed, he said at length, the city changed and us with it.
By us, he meant Durgov citizens.
It's always been bad here. Murder, discord, the things people will do to each other. I've seen it all. But this is the first time I've felt such fear. Not just my own, but it's everywhere. It's like it slipped in through the cracks when the sky turned red. It has been sipping into us ever since, in our air, our food, our bodies.
What are you trying to say, Proctor? He rubbed his chin, the lip biting, now chronic.
Have you ever felt rain before it starts? You know, smelled it or tasted it on the air and just you.
Of course. Hasn't everybody to some extent?
Feels like that. Like something is coming. Only ain't no rain.
He fell abruptly silent after that, and Maybeth was glad to be rid of his company the instant she was finished. Levio gave a curt wave as she took her leave, a vacant look in his eyes not so different from Gethic. He looked almost hollow. Something is coming, only it is no rain. The words followed her after she left the murder scene, and so too the scent of lavender, faint on the air. Levio must have smelled it too, but neither spoke of it. To do so would only make it more real. The paintings will be her salvation, the restoration of the saints and the cleansing of her soul. She returned to her domicile, the idea of indulging in such pious work soothing. No interruptions, she ordered, and Gethic nullified the phonogram before retreating into his alcove. Maybeth set to work, revivifying all pigment, giving it vibrancy and depth, purification through art. The brush posed in her hand. I have to know, she murmured as a deep obsession took hold. I'm a sailor, and they are siren. I shall go gratefully to their rocks. A scalpel replaced the brush. Mavis' attention turned to the as yet unrevealed and the promise of the unknown, the image in Pentimento. She worked feverishly, almost in frenzy. Descriptions like flecks of skin flaying from a corpse. Maybeth barely noticed. The work came easily, paint peeling away without resistance, as if what lay below wanted to be found. She would let it. She wanted it, too, more than anything. After several hours, a fresh vista began to materialize beneath the veneer of the first. Not bones, but an Eden of lush and exotic flowers of strange crystal and dappled sunlight, and something her eyes did not want to acknowledge. And in the stark moment of revelation, a sudden inertialess lurch seized upon her, and she realized her mistake, her terrible mistake. It was paradise, rasped Maybeth, and fell into a deep, fathomless dream. She is walking barefoot, the dew cold and refreshing against her skin. A grove had risen up around her, swollen with strange trees that are ripe with luscious, heart-shaped fruit. She is tempted to take a bite and reaches for the branches' bounty, but something stops her. In the distance, thunder, or what sounds like thunder, and a white noise, susurration like a cataract rushing over a cave mouth. She turns a prey animal altered to the scent of a predator and sees him. In shadow at first, the strange scented arbors of the forest hide him from her sight, and she has to twist to see. He is naked, apart from the modesty cloth around his waist. A study in anatomical perfection, almost deific, unreal, a statue given perfect animation. His muscles are carved as is from peak opal, and a mane cascades around his shoulders like spun silver. Violet eyes glint and flash alive. Amused, desirous, she flashes at the thought, terror and arousal warring like belligerent nations. In that instant of connection, she knows him, or rather, what he represents. He is the paragon of pleasures, a lord of excess, and he is here for her. I know you, he says, so his lips are unmoving. I am you, and for a moment it is bliss, until the blades unsheath and the hooks unfurled, and she is pinioned and torn, undressed of her skin. It flutters away like taffeta, like flightless wings. And he smiles that over-wide smile, his teeth like pearls, and the scent of lavender overwhelms her. She doesn't scream, she can barely breathe. Something heavy is pressing against her chest, a noose taut around her throat. She thrashes, a lamp shatters as she kicks it, absinthe spills in a milky flood. The drapes tear at her grasping fingers, and the sunlight crashes in. Am I dying? A hot pucker in her chest, jabbing at the coals of her organs. Please. Then relief. Her bitings loosed in an instant, the pain gone. Maybeth stares, blinking in the harsh red morning. Its light brings revelation. The paintings are not three, they are one, where the obfuscation of newer pain has been excised to reveal the old. She sees paradise stretched over each canvas, a triptych of pulchritudinous gardens, vigorous, staggering, like a foreign country to her senses. seeded with bones and nourished with blood, Eden springing vibrantly from the slaughter. The juxtaposition is so incongruous as to be almost indescribable. A familiar grove stands out, partially revealed beneath flaking pigment. Its strange trees are burgeoning with heart-shaped fruit. No, no fruit. Hearts. Living, beating human hearts. And they're not trees, they are people. Rooted and cruciform. Maybeth recoiled. The scalpel she didn't know she was still holding clattering to the floor as she muffled away on her backside, kicking madly, arms scrubbing. The wall was solid at her back, and she could not flee no further. Her gaze was transfixed on the paintings, at the parts still to be scraped away, at horrors yet unknown. For 3 days she did not move, did not speak, did not sleep, until Livio contacted her again. Fires lit the city, the smoke thick but unable to hide the blood-red sky. It had turned a deeper crimson with the onset of night and echoed with the shrieking of desperate men. Maybeth did her best to avoid the crowds. After alighting from the Magvel, she and Gethic took side streets and lesser-known byways. It scared her, the rioting, but that fear had been dulled by something darker. It called still, but she ignored it, an effort of will she could not sustain. Levio looked skeletal as he waited with 2 armored peacekeepers beneath the sepulchre's portico. Deep rings sunk his eyes like small pebbles at the bottom of a well. He finished a smoke stick, crushing it beneath his heel where he joined a regiment of others and lit another. Inside. Maybeth followed, leaving the 2 sentries outside. The tomb had been made for a dignitary of the city, an ecclesiarch, judging by the religious statuary. Something lay piled in one corner, folded neatly upon a stone seat. She assumed they were robes. Perhaps they are symbolic, thought Maybeth. A reliquary stood upon a plinth in the middle of the gloomy chamber. The bones of 2 saints entwined, their heads upturned to a light they will never see, their bony hands outstretched in folk supplication. I do not understand, said Maybeth, frowning. Where is the... Levio ignited a lumen, and the bones shone faint pink. She gasped as the awful truth revealed itself. Emperor, he isn't here. Beth Livia. The robes, they weren't. And then the bones. How? Levio did not answer, and that was answer enough. Markings had been screenshot into the bone. Maybeth moved nearer for a better look. Outside, the claimer had grown closer. A word carved into femurs and rib bones and clavicles. Paradisum. High Gothic, barely used now, but more common several centuries ago. A warning shout alerted her. Stay back! One of the peacekeepers. A coalition of voices answered. Paradise, paradise, paradise. I can't do this. Maybeth fled the chamber and stepped outside into the chaos. A mob had descended. They were afraid. Like wild animals running with fires, knives, desperate to quench their fear with blood. A shotgun barked. So close it startled her, and the sound of it rang in her ears like tinnitus. The sepulchre was sunk into a natural valley, and there were men roaring down the ramps towards her. A second blast, no longer in warning. A man was cut down. The 2 peacekeepers stepped up, one kneeling as the other stood and braced. They belied their authority. Stand back! The coming horde, but their words lacked conviction. Levio did enjoyment and stayed with the dead. Breathless, terrified, her mind close to shutting down, Maybeth called out, Gethic! She asked, get me away from here! The servitor obeyed. his large and patchwork frame never more reassuring as he drove like a plow into the mob. Maybeth stayed close, a desperate hand clinging to his belt. Behind her, the shotgun spoke again. They spoke one more time. A press of shouting men around her, unable to dull the shock of the ground sound. Kill him! Paradise, kill him! Then, no more. She was fortunate. The mob had no interest in her, though she would have been collateral if not for her slave. He must have killed a few in his headlong charge. She had heard bone-breaking cries suddenly choked off. Gethic himself was torn, a dozen wounds spilling blood and oil, the whole mess of it congealing as it turned his boiler suit black. He stumbled, slowing. Servitor is a cyborg, but it is still flesh. Maybeth knew his memory injuries were mortal. Dull-eyed, uncomprehending, Gethic got her as far as the only maglev out of the district before he slumped. A puff-bed left slack on its strings and did not steer again. Maybeth reached Auric House in a half-blind panic. The guard was absent, his post likely fled. Bolting up the stairs, she got to her domicile and fumbled with the locks. Several nervous glances behind her, revealing nothing but the dimly lit corridor. Inside, the door slammed in her wake. Heart hammering, she lurched through the entryway and into the studio where the paintings stood, apparently innocuous. And yet, the old renderings of saints had been further scrapped away. By her hand, by another, Maybeth no longer knew for sure. She tried to raise Irena by the phonogram. She had a speech prepared about demanding to know the provenance of the paintings and the identity of who had brought her expertise. She would reject the commission, claim it was occult, proscribed. She would threaten, mention the interrogators. Her blood was up, and she trembled with anticipation of the furore to come, but Irena did not answer, and the phonogram returned only dead air. Maybeth smashed down the receiver cup, partly shattering the plastic. She wanted to scream, anger, a natural attitude to fear. A snarl on her lips, she stalked to the lectern and snatched all three canvases, hastily bundling them under her arms. She recalled the patron's address in the city, and despite her best good stance, ventured back out. I should burn them, she thought, but her not desire to add an angry pattern to her woes. The merchants in Durgov were not known for their forgiveness, particularly in matters of property. It might not matter anyway. The city was burning, at least in the slums and the poor districts. A fever had gripped it, fear, the great motivator for selfish men to hide their anxieties behind cruelty and wanton violence. Maybeth wanted nothing more than to shut herself away, but only when this last act was done and she was rid of the paintings could she hide again. She had been hiding for years. Ever since Hakastro, ever since. Lost in her thoughts, Maybeth almost did not realize she had arrived at her destination. A razor wire fence surrounded a nondescript warehouse and offices. A faded sign declared the name of the merchant combine who owned it, and answered the minor mystery of what the V stood for on the metal tube. Volgast Exports. The warehouse was burning, every inch of it wreathed in conflagration. Flames reached up into the sky, turning it a deeper red, staining it black with smoke. Nothing else burned, only this property, and the mob had not reached this district yet, and the fire did not spread, as if dedicated solely to the destruction of Volgast Exports. The owners of it sent a spasm through Maybeth. Her grip tightened on the canvases, still clenched in her shaking hands. She wanted to tear them, rend them to pieces, and cast them into the fire. Instead, she sank to her knees and wept. It took a few moments for Maybeth to regain her composure. She knew she couldn't stay here. She had to get back to Auric House. Maybe she could try Irena again. She had not realized how badly she needed to hear her voice. Any voice. Stumbling through side streets, it was not long before a part of the mob found her. Maybeth thought perhaps they were ballet makers, through their grubby overalls who would suit many menial professions. Please, she said, shivering like prey in a hunter's hide, I have nothing of value. The look on the men's faces suggested otherwise, and she had to stifle an involuntary yelp as she started to back away from her aggressors. She had fine clothes, at least to the likes of them, jewellery, ostensible wealth, a noble woman abroad on unquiet streets and unprotected. Maybeth pulled her collar of her robes tighter. An alleyway she had not noticed before suddenly presented itself, and she took it, bolting like a startled gearings. She dumped the canvases to hells with the consequences. The merchants could burn like their fathing warehouse for all she cared. Behind her she heard the grunting of pursuit and the tread of heavy, dirty boots. Oh shit, oh shit. They were closing, driven by something animalistic. No, no, no. And then nothing. After a few hundred yards, Maybeth slowed and then stopped. The faint aroma of lavender piqued her nostrils as she wheeled around in a panic, half expecting to see him. But the narrow byway she found herself in was empty, although the rude tenements crowded on either side. Turning, she realized no one was chasing her either. The entire street was silent, as if shrinking back into itself and holding its breath. Not questioning her good fortune, but trembling at so close a call, Maybeth found the Auric house again. She staggered inside, her breathing ragged, and began to shake. Trauma settled in now. The adrenaline had bled away. A drink will ease the nerves, maybe a bottle or two. The absinthe variably gulped into the glass, the edge clinking as it met the lips of the bottle. Maybeth drained it. Poured another and drained that too. Slowly calming down. She took the bottle and the glass and went to find a place to slump. As she passed the open archway to the studio, the bottle and the glass slipped from her fingers and smashed against the floor. On the lectern were the 3 canvases, and as the paint began to fragment, flecking away like dead skin, Maybeth found she was drawn to them, to it. A single vista doggedly revealed for her to see. Without knowing why, she took up her scalpel and began to scrape away the upper layer. Scrape, 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 and with every stroke, scrape, scrape, she uncovered greater and greater horror. Scrape, 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 a scene of beauty and torture. Scrape, scrape, of unparallel human suffering, so vivid she could almost hear their screaming. Scrape, 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 scrape. Tears streamed down Maybeth's face, but she could not stop. Scrape, 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 scrape. It had her now. Scrape, 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 scrape. Perhaps it had been taken her long ago, that first night. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Perhaps it was inevitable. Scrape, 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 scrape. The painting, the true image, was a conduit. Hacasto had always taught her that art is a voyeur upon the soul, its flaws and virtues laid bare upon canvas. Something from the realm of the soul had found its way through. The lavender man stood proudly amongst his depravity, his paradise, immortalized in oil paint. The artist, whoever it was, had captured his essence perfectly. And in a moment of stasis, caught between action and inaction, Maybeth wondered how much of it was actually paint. A gentle touch nudged her hand back to the task. Scrape, 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 and she shuddered. The scent of lavender stronger now, and warm breath upon her neck. I am here, the killer said without speaking, as I promised I would be. She had done this. Her pride, her obsession, her existence. He had brought her to his attention. Please, please, she tried to whisper, but a soft susurration stayed any further objection. Outside her hub, the city had begun to eat itself. The rioting was everywhere, rising like a black tide to wash away anything good, anything pure. The structures would not hold. She bit her lip, using the pay to try to drown it out. The cloying scent of his perfume made her gag. but she dare not stop. Scrape, 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 scrape. She felt the heat of his skin near her own, both a furnace and a glacier. Mabeth scraped away, scrape, scrape, the above to reveal the below, knowing that as she did so, his foothold in the real world would solidify. A dead sky presented itself, blood-red and terrible, a great wall thronged with desperate fighting in the distance, God and monsters vying for the fate of mankind. The thoughts came unbidden, the memories and realizations not her own. Terra, a voice in her told her. She knew it then. The vista revealed upon the commons. An ancient war, the oldest of wars, the great heresy, the long war, the voice replied, and could not hide its bitterness. The last piece fell away, a nondescript corner, but its styles at odds with the rest, as if painted by a different hand. Two robed figures. Mabeth released a gasp, for it was her, a perfect portrait. She had a red blade in her hand, and before her on the ground was the second figure, older, dying, a feeble hand pressed to the one in his chest, as blood poured from his mouth. Mabeth was transfixed, the bare truth of her crime rendered as clearly as a pict, an impossible image as damning as any confession. His perfumed breath broke her dark remembrance. Perfection always comes at a price. The hand about her neck was firm, but not painful. Not yet. It turned her head, and she took in her abode. The indolence, the trappings of wealth, desire, and obsession. Tell me, what did your master call it? That which is hidden beneath. Pentimento? Said Mabeth, almost beyond the ability for rational thought. It means redemption, she added. A needless translation. Her gaze now fixed upon the image of her murdering Hakasta, so she could be preeminent, so she could be perfect. A lie to hide another lie, the killer answered, his organic voice as old as millennia. Mabeth would find no redemption here, she realized, as the blades and the hooks bit into her flesh. As she screamed, they started to pull. But there will always be art, the killer replied, as revealing her thoughts. And this, my canvas. Well, then, there we go. Supposedly one of the scariest stories produced in Warhammer 40k Horror. Whatever you think. I'm not the first one to narrate it. Wes Hammer, that bigger channel, has done it. If you liked it, please press the like button and subscribe. Starting from next month, I will start narrating, of course, with Mark Smiles' blessings if he likes what I'm doing, his novel Blackheart, which is a continuation of his novel The Barrow. The Barrow has an excellent narrated version at Audible, which I really strongly suggest, and you can actually get it for free if you're a member. And the only other thing I can say is that I also have gotten access to Inferno. I will try to narrate some of the stories there, especially those that have not been narrated by War Wyvern or Border Prince, which are the two channels I strongly suggest to listen if you like narrated 40k stories. That's all. I hope the best for you all. I hope you enjoyed this scary story, and you will hear from me again in May.